Good morning everyone. Myself Santosh Kumar Mishra, working as an assistant professor in IT department in Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College. Today in this lecture I will explain you the working principle of computer. I will tell you the basic introduction of computer, how the computer work we will see. We will also see what is the working principle and what are the different components of a digital computer. Let us start the lecture. First of all, let us define the computer. What the computer is. As we all know that computer is an electronic machine. As we all know that computer works through electrical signal. It is an electronic machine that can be instructed to carry out sequences of arithmetical or logical operations automatically through computer program. Means we can solve any problem, we can perform any task through computer, and that task will be done automatically, but that automatic operation is done by writing certain set of instructions in some programming language, and when we input the data, computer performs some operations processing over those data and convert those raw facts and figure, that is data, into information that is meaningful. Means computer is just a machine that is based on input process output principle. It takes the input, the data is input through some input devices, processing is performed over those data. That processing may be some arithmetical operation, some logical operations, and those data is converted into the meaningful form, and that meaningful form of data is called information. Means computer convert your data to the information after processing. Now, this is the block diagram of digital computer. Computer are of different types. It is of analog type, digital type, or hybrid type. Analog computer are those that are based on analog signal. Digital computer are those that are based on digital signal, discrete signals, and hybrid are mix up of that. For example, the computers fabricated in the ICU of the hospitals are examples of hybrid computer. To understand the working principle of the computer, I have drawn this block diagram. We can broadly categorize the computer into this part. First is input unit, then central processing unit, then output unit, and then memory unit. Input unit is responsible for, let's move, I have described all the units one by one. Input unit is responsible for taking inputs from outside world. Taking input from outside world. It takes the input, then convert that into computer understandable format and supply to the system, computer system, for further processing. Means the taking of input from the outside world is done by some input devices. Input devices is responsible for receiving the data from outside world, and for that there are different types of input devices available like keyboard, mouse, scanner, joystick, digital camera, microphone. Depending upon the requirement, we use any of the input devices to take the input from the outside world. Then the storage unit. Storage unit is just a circuit in our computer system that store our data temporarily or permanently. Data during processing are stored temporarily in the computer system, or for further accessing of the data is stored permanently in some memory unit that is called storage unit also. It is broadly divided into two parts, two types: primary memory, primary storage, or secondary memory, secondary storage, or we also call it as auxiliary memory. Then what the primary memory is, what the primary storage is. Primary memory is computer memory which is generally used to hold the program during current execution. When during execution, the primary memory is responsible to receive the data temporarily. The data being received from the input device, the intermediate and final result of the program that is accessed directly by the CPU at very fast speed. Primary storage has limited capacity because it is very expensive. Generally, it is made up of semiconductor devices. It is of two types, RAM and ROM. RAM is called random access memory, that is also called read-write memory. ROM is, as the name suggests, read-only memory. It is also called, we cannot write the there are certain ways, but once the data is written, we just read the data. Secondary storage is a bulky memory. Huge amount of data are stored permanently in secondary storage. It is also called mass storage device, but the data, whatever data is stored in secondary storage, must be bring to the primary memory, because the primary memory is the memory that is directly accessible by the processor. Processor look the data from the primary RAM of the primary memory. Means if the data is stored in secondary memory, it is just moved to the primary memory, and from there it is passed to the processor when the processor is ready to process that. Now comes to the central processing unit. Central processing unit is also called the heart of your computer. It is the main unit that is responsible for actual processing of your data. It has two parts, arithmetic logic unit and control unit. Arithmetic data received from outside world goes to the primary memory. From there it comes to the processor, where central processing unit process those data, and that in that processing it applies some arithmetical like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or some logical operations over data. Logical means like OR logic, AND logic, NOT logic, XOR logic. That logical operations are performed over those data. All the components of the computer must work in a timely synchronized manner to process it correctly, and for that central processing unit is responsible to send control signal to the different components of computer so that all the units may work in a timely synchronized manner. Now, control unit controls all the units in computer, as I have already explained. It is also called the central nervous system of our computer, and during processing all the components must work in a timely synchronized manner. As and when the unit must respond, must act, should be done at that time, and that timing control signal is sent by this control unit. Central processing unit has arithmetic logic unit that perform some arithmetical operations over the data and some logical operations over data that I have already explained you all. This central processing unit has certain small memory also, that is called register, that is designed in the processor for temporary storage of data during processing. And then when the data is processed, it is sent back to the output unit, and the function of the output unit is to send the process result to the user. or it can also send the data to the secondary storage for permanent storage. Example of output unit is monitor, speaker and printer. This is, since we have seen that there are many memories, I have drawn here the hierarchy of memory. This triangular hierarchy of the memory shows that from bottom to top, when we move, the execution speed enhances and size reduced. When we go from bottom to top, the execution speed enhances and size reduced, cost increased. Okay, means, and this memory is as we go from bottom to top, the memory is gone more closer to the processor. Like CPU register is the smallest size memory. It is, since it is fabricated within the processor, that's why it is the fastest memory. There it has limited capacity, it is most expensive. Okay, then comes to the cache memory. Cache memory is also called SRAM. It is made by RAM. It is made by RAM, but it is put within the processor or close to the processor, between the main memory and the processor. And I have explained this cache, this register, CPU register. Then cache memory is used by CPU for memory which is being accessed over and over, again and again. The data that we are accessing, the processor is accessing again and again, are stored in the cache memory. Instead of pulling it every time from the RAM, it is put in cache for fast access. It is also a smaller memory, however larger than internal register. Okay, it is faster than main memory, but slower than the CPU register. And its most important task is to store the data from main memory. It pulled the data, store it, and whenever the processor is free, it send those data from cache memory to the processor. Now main memory is also called, RAM, random access memory. And random access memory, as name suggests, the data may be randomly accessed from anywhere. It is not a sequential like the magnetic tape is, where the data is accessed sequentially. It is randomly, the data, the information stored in the RAM may be accessed randomly from anywhere. It is also known as main memory, system memory, physical memory or RAM. It is called main memory because this is the only memory that is directly accessible by the processor. It is the memory that is directly accessible by the processor. The processor looks the data for processing in the main memory itself. That's why it is RAM is also called main memory. It is volatile. It is volatile means when the power is on, data remains in the memory, but once the power is off, the data will also be lost in this memory. It is faster than secondary memory, faster than hard disk, but slower than the register. It is also slower than the cache memory. And cache memory is also made up of RAM. It accesses the data and instruction randomly instead of sequential as accessed in the CPU, as accessed in the compact disk. Secondary storage is a bulky storage, mass storage, and the data that is huge, that is big, are stored permanently into the secondary memory, and whenever the data is required to process, it is called back to the main memory, and from there it goes to the processor for further processing. and it is slower than the main memory. Okay, thank you, thanks a lot. We will meet in the next lecture.